U.S. intervention in Venezuela, democracy, power struggles, and global impact. In early January 2026, the geopolitical landscape of the Western Hemisphere was shaken by one of the most audacious foreign policy moves in recent U.S. history. The United States launched a large-scale military operation in Venezuela that resulted in the capture of President Nicolas Maduro and his wife, Cilia Flores. The operation, described by Washington as targeting drug trafficking and organized crime, quickly evolved into a broader contest over governance, democracy, and international norms. The military operation and its aftermath. On January 3rd, U.S. forces struck multiple sites around Caracas and arrested Maduro, flying him and his wife to New York, where they now face federal charges, including narco-terrorism. President Donald Trump declared that the U.S. would run Venezuela temporarily to ensure a stable transition, framing the intervention as necessary to curb criminal networks and restore order. However, the reality on the ground is more complex. Venezuela's Supreme Tribunal of Justice declared a temporary vacancy in the presidency, and Delcy Rodriguez, Maduro's vice president, assumed the role of acting president as per constitutional provisions. Rodriguez initially rejected the U.S. operation as illegal and continued to insist that Maduro is the legitimate head of state. U.S. intentions and challenges to democracy. The Trump administration's rhetoric about running Venezuela has sparked intense debate. Senior U.S. officials have been working behind the scenes to shape a pliant interim government and leverage economic and energy tools to influence outcomes, particularly around Venezuela's vast oil resources. Yet, American plans are not straightforward. Secretary of State Marco Rubio clarified that the U.S. would not govern Venezuela day-to-day, instead using economic and diplomatic levers to press for reforms. Critics argue that a democratic transition cannot be engineered through military force and external pressure alone, warning that sustainable change must respect Venezuelans' political will and international law. Rodriguez's position and internal tensions. Delcy Rodriguez's role as acting president places her in a fragile position between Venezuelan sovereignty and U.S. expectations. While Trump initially indicated cooperation, he later warned Rodriguez she could face consequences, worse than Maduro, if she does not comply with U.S. demands, a stark example of Washington's high-stakes diplomacy. Rodriguez, for her part, has called publicly for cooperation based on mutual respect and peace, signaling a shift toward dialogue and diplomatic engagement despite the extraordinary circumstances. International reactions and democratic concerns. Global reactions have been deeply divided. European Union countries stressed that any effort to restore democracy in Venezuela must respect the will of its people and adhere to international law. Many Latin American governments have condemned the U.S. action as a dangerous precedent that violates sovereignty and the norms of the international system. Within the U.S., political leaders from both parties have criticized the operation for bypassing Congress and lacking a clear post-intervention strategy. Analysts warn that the crisis may reshape global governance norms in the 21st century. The U.S. strategy, blending military action with energy interests and political pressure, raises questions about whether external powers can facilitate democratic transitions without undermining the very principles they claim to uphold. Furthermore, the situation has rekindled debates about the Monroe Doctrine and U.S. interventionism in Latin America, challenging traditional non-interventionist policies with an assertive new posture that critics call neo-imperial. The unfolding events in Venezuela have not only destabilized the long-entrenched Maduro regime but also forced a reckoning over how democratic transitions should occur in deeply divided nations. While Washington frames its actions as a path toward freedom and rule of law, critics see it as a test of whether external military intervention can ever be compatible with true democratic self-determination. Only time will tell whether this dramatic chapter brings Venezuela closer to democracy or triggers prolonged conflict and regional instability.